People ask me sometimes what it feels like to stand completely still while another man loses his composure. They expect some kind of satisfaction in the answer. I never give them one, because there isn't any. What I give them is this. It feels like morning at the North Gate, with overnight snow on the cobblestones and a black saloon car idling 40 feet from my chain, and a man in a charcoal suit walking toward me like I'm a door he forgot to open. That is where this story begins. First light, the 3rd week of January, Aldenmere Palace. I had been on that post for 11 years by then. The North Gate is not the ceremonial face of the palace. That is the South Arch, with its gilded spokes and the tourist crowd that gathers by 9 o'clock. The North Gate is the working gate. Supply vans, authorized staff, the occasional vehicle carrying someone who matters enough to use the discreet entrance. It is a wide stone archway, iron chain at chest height, a sentry box that does nothing to stop the wind. The cobblestones that morning were glazed with a thin coat of overnight frost, and the light coming through the archway was the flat gray of a January dawn that has not yet committed to becoming a day. The snow had come overnight, not heavy, barely a dusting, but it lay in the hollows between cobblestones, precise and undisturbed, and it made the whole forecourt quieter than usual. I stood where I had stood every morning for 11 years, heels together, rifle at the slope, eyes forward. The bearskin takes the weight of cold air differently in winter. It settles heavier, presses down, and the white gloves against the rifle stock were the only bright thing in the gate for the first quarter of an hour. I was not thinking about the cold. A man who thinks about the cold is not standing his post. He is standing in the cold, which is a different thing entirely. Before I came to Aldenmere, I had done 7 years in the field cold weather reconnaissance, 2 theaters, 2 campaign clasps I keep under my tunic where nobody can see them. I have stood still in places that made a January forecourt feel like a drawing room. The post at the North Gate is not hardship, but it is a post, and what that means, what it has always meant, is that you are the fixed point. Everything else moves. You do not. The black saloon arrived at 23 minutes past 7. I heard it before I saw it, the particular sound of a heavy car moving faster than the forecourt speed restriction allows, then braking hard on the frost. It stopped at the approach line, which told me the driver at least knew the protocols, even if whoever had dispatched him did not know the gate hours. Authorized access at the North Gate did not begin until 8 o'clock. This was not a secret. It was printed on every clearance letter that left the Chamberlain's office. The driver stayed in the car. The passenger did not. He was in his mid-50s, I would say, a man who had spent enough time in rooms where decisions get made that he had come to believe his presence was itself a kind of clearance. The suit was expensive. The briefcase was thin, the kind that signals you carry documents rather than tools. He walked toward me with the pace of a man who expects the chain to lift before he reaches it. And when it did not, he stopped 2 feet away and looked at me the way men look at a turnstile that has failed to register their card. "I have a briefing at 8, he said. "I need to get through now." I kept my eyes forward. "Sir, authorized vehicle access at the North Gate begins at 800 hours. If you have a clearance letter, it may be presented at that time." He made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff, somewhere in between. "I'm aware of the official hours. I'm running ahead of schedule and I'd like to get set up. The briefing is in the East Wing. I know where I'm going." "Yes, sir." A pause. He was recalibrating. Men like him recalibrate quickly. They are used to finding the lever. "Then you understand I don't need to be walked through the building. I just need past this chain." "Yes, sir, at 800 hours." He looked at me for a moment the way you look at a problem you thought was simple. Then he said, "Move." Just the one word, not a question. I want to be honest about what happens in a man's interior in a moment like that, because people have the idea that a guardsman at his post is not thinking, that the stillness means absence. The opposite is true. In the half-second after that word landed, I was aware of the frost on the cobblestones, the weight of the rifle, the specific timbre of his voice, impatient but not yet angry, a man issuing what he considers a routine correction, and I was running, quickly and without drama, the same calculation I had run 100 times at 100 different pressure points in 11 years. The calculation is this: Does this instruction come from someone with the authority to give it, and does obeying it fall within my orders? The answers to both questions were no. He was not in my chain of command. My orders were explicit. The chain did not lift before 8 o'clock without a duty officer's authorization. I said, "Sir, I cannot lift the chain without authorization. If you'd like, I can contact the duty officer on your behalf." "I don't need a duty officer." His voice had sharpened now. "I am a senior government liaison. I have been cleared for this facility. All I am asking you to do is lift a chain." "Yes, sir, I understand." "Then do it." I did not answer that one. There are moments where the answer is the silence, and a man of any real intelligence understands it. He was intelligent. He simply was not accustomed to the silence being held. He stepped closer. Not threateningly. He was not that kind of man, but in the way of someone trying to make the physical distance match the social distance he believed existed between his authority and mine. "Do you know who I am?" "I know your vehicle is not on the 8 o'clock authorization list, sir." That was the truest answer I could give him, and also, I'll admit, the one that carried the sharpest edge. He heard both things in it. His jaw tightened. I have had years to think about that exchange and what was actually happening inside it. He was not a cruel man. He was not a bully in the ordinary sense. He was a man who had navigated large institutions for a long time by understanding which rooms he was welcome in and making himself welcome in the rest through sheer certainty of manner. That certainty had served him well. It had opened a great many doors. What it had never encountered, apparently, was a door that was indifferent to certainty. That registered none of the social signals, responded to none of the pressure, and did not need anything from him at all. That is what a post is. It does not need anything from you. "Get your duty officer on the line," he said. "Right now." "Yes." "Sir." I keyed the gate phone without moving my feet. The duty officer that morning was Sergeant Aldous Marin, a precise man, former Signals Corps, not given to elaboration. I told him I had a civilian at the North Gate requesting early access, no vehicle on the morning list, requesting authorization or instruction. Marin said he would make a call and come back to me. I thanked him and stood. The envoy, I will call him that, which is what he was, had taken 3 steps back toward his car. Not retreat, he was making a call of his own. I watched him in my peripheral vision without moving my head. He spoke briefly, with the clipped economy of a man leaving a message for someone who will act on it. Then he came back to the chain. "I've made a call," he said. "Someone will be getting in touch with your command shortly. I'd like you to think carefully about whether you want to be standing where you are when that call lands." I kept my eyes forward. "I'll be right here, sir." He said nothing for a moment. Then, "You realize this is entirely unnecessary." I had no answer for that either, because the word unnecessary was doing a great deal of work in that sentence that I did not believe it could support. What was unnecessary was an early approach to a gate that opened at 8 o'clock. What was necessary was the chain. But I did not say any of that. You do not argue the point. The point is the post. You hold the post, and the argument resolves itself. He made one more attempt, quieter, almost reasonable in its register. "Look, I understand you have a job to do. I'm not asking you to abandon it. I'm asking you to use some judgment here. I am running late, I have a clearance, and the formality of 35 minutes is not what any of this was designed to protect against." That one, I will admit, landed differently. It was not wrong exactly as an argument. 35 minutes before the authorized hour, a man with a legitimate clearance in daylight. In any ordinary interpretation of the situation, you could make the case. I have met guards who would have lifted the chain. I have met duty officers who would have waved it through. My orders were my orders, and my orders were not use judgment where you see fit. My orders were a time and a process. The process exists because judgment is a variable, and variables are exploitable. The time exists because an entry point that opens when the man at the chain feels good about it is not a controlled entry point at all. Every exception is an invitation to test the next exception. I had seen that truth written in harder circumstances than a frost-glazed forecourt. I held. "Sir," I said, "if the briefing requires early setup, A formal request to the Chamberlain's office can authorize early access in advance. I can have someone assist you with that process after 8. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he walked back to his car without another word. A palace steward who had come through the gate at 7:45. She managed morning deliveries, had clearance, used it daily, had stopped near the arch to watch. She stood with a clipboard and a coffee and the expression of someone who has witnessed this particular species of friction before and understands how it resolves. At 7:51, the gate phone rang. It was not Sergeant Marin. It was the duty colonel's line, Colonel Evren Host, Household Division, whose voice I had heard perhaps 4 times in my career and remembered each time because it had the quality of a man who has decided the outcome of a situation before he begins speaking. He told me to hold the position, that 3 vehicles were en route from the Chamberlain's motor pool, and that I was to take no further action until they arrived. I acknowledged and stood. The envoy had heard the phone. He was watching me. "Well," he said, "help is on the way, sir." He did not like the phrasing. He walked back to his car. The 3 vehicles arrived at 7:58. 2 were palace administration saloons. The 3rd was a dark estates car that I recognized as the duty colonel's transport. They pulled up in a line on the approach road, and Colonel Host got out of the rear vehicle alone. He was a lean man in his early 60s, campaign medals on his chest, the economical movements of someone who had never needed to make himself look large because he simply was. He did not come to the gate. He walked to the envoy's car. I could not hear what was said. I was not meant to. That conversation lasted 4 minutes by the clock on the archway. At the end of it, the envoy got back into his car. His driver turned the vehicle around. Colonel Host came to the gate. He stopped a foot from my position and looked at me for a moment. He did not smile, because smiling would have made it something other than what it was. "Well done, Corporal," he said. "Sir." He walked back to his vehicle. I looked it up afterward, because I wanted to understand the whole of it. The envoy's clearance letter, it turned out, had authorized him for access to the south entrance, not the north. He had been at the wrong gate. He had also been an hour ahead of the time on his own paperwork. He had, in other words, been wrong in every particular, and had responded to being wrong by asking a man who was right in every particular to move. That is the thing about a post. It does not care about your schedule. It does not care about your title, your suit, your certainty that the normal rules are a formality that applies to other people. It is a fixed point, and the man standing it is a fixed point, and the only way through is the right way, at the right time, with the right authorization. That is not bureaucracy. That is the entire point. The morning shift ended at noon. I handed off to the next man, walked the gate check, and went in. The steward with the clipboard was still in the forecourt, sorting the delivery register. She looked up when I passed. "I knew you wouldn't move," she said. I told her I appreciated that. She went back to her register. I went back to my day. The chain at the north gate hung where it had always hung, and the snow in the hollows of the cobblestones was still there, undisturbed, exactly as it had been when the morning started. Some days that is all it takes. You stand where you are supposed to stand, and you hold, and eventually the world reorganizes itself around the fact that you haven't moved. It is not dramatic. It is not something you tell with any pride in your voice. But I'll tell you this. It is the only kind of strength I have ever believed in. The kind that doesn't move.